Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to Nomad Overland. So today is my first piece of equipment to show to you, to give you a sense of perhaps of what I've used in the past, what I hope to use in the future, and how good pieces, if taken care of properly, can last you a lifetime, or at least a reasonably amount of time. Come on back soon and let's check out the North Face Alta. Hi everybody, and welcome back to Nomad Overland. That's right. So before we get started, just a couple of quick things. Number one, YouTube channel, sub, share, like the video, really helps out. We've only been around for a few days, but those numbers are starting to tick upwards, and it is all to you, ladies and gentlemen out there, who have been putting this together. So thank you so much for starting that process with me. It's really encouraging. Also, new Instagram. You can Instagram / Korea Overlander. We also have a brand new Patreon page. Whoo! Although that's not finished yet, I'm still working on that. I will, however, leave a link to both of those in the description below. Please sign up and let's get this community started. So today I want to talk to you about tents. And yes, it looks like I could use a tent inside my living room. But the reason why I'm doing it in here is number one, well, right outside I'm on the third floor, and right outside there's a parking lot. I don't see a place to really have the tent and talk about it unless I was to, of course, lug the tent all the way to somewhere else and do the video, which I can't do because my kids will be home in a couple of hours. And right now, this is a golden opportunity for me with no kids around to make a video. So I want to talk a little bit about tents. This is the first of several pieces of equipment videos that I'm going to be producing. And today is just going to be a general discussion about tents. So, first of all, if you don't know what a tent is, you need to sub to the channel. A tent is basically an outside sleeping device that's going to keep the rain and the elements and the mozzies and mosquitoes and the bugs and everything away from you. So yeah, you need to get one of those. But there are, of course, different tents that you can use. Long gone are the days of a huge, heavy, and smelly canvas tent that I bet some of you went camping with, as I did when I was about 4 or 5 years old with my parents. Gone are those days. And I would say, even looking at this tent here, gone are the days of these tents too. But I'm going to come back to that. So what should you be looking for in a tent when you're going to purchase one? Now, obviously, price is one consideration that you're going to want to think about. But you also want to counterbalance that with the idea that a tent is an investment. And so, as I was talking to a friend of mine a couple of days, Robert, you know who you are. As I was talking to a friend of mine a couple of days ago, he said, "Tent, why don't you just go to Emart and pick one up for $30? I've seen them there." I kind of rolled my eyes and said, well, you could do that, but it's probably not advisable. In the same way that you'd want to pick something that actually has good reviews and fits your budget and also provides you a long-term usage. See, a $30 tent is just that. It's a $30 tent. There's lots of things about it that you might think are great, like the price or the price or the price or the price. But then there's a lot of other things that could go disastrously wrong with a tent like that. For example, the seams in the tent, probably not that strong. The seams in the tent, probably not waterproofed. The floor and the tent itself is probably more plasticky than anything, which is really bad for inside the tent because condensation is not going to escape particularly well, even if there's a fly. So, again, going back to the point, what should you be getting? Well, I want to use my tent as an example of some of the things that you should be looking out for. Now, this tent behind me, in my living room, is a North Face Alta. These tents, North Face doesn't even make anymore. And when did I buy this? In about the year 2000, 1999. Yeah, 99, 98, something like that. So basically what I'm saying is, this tent is about 20 years old. Now how much did I pay for this tent? Well, I was lucky actually. I got it on a really decent sale. It was like kind of a, we need to get rid of this merchandise sort of sale. So I actually got it at a really, really good price. I think I paid about $250 for it. Regularly, the tent was closer to $500. So it was nearly 50% off. And that's trick number one. High price tent for a low sale bargain. That's what you want to be going for. Why? Because you're getting a good quality tent for something that is coming in at much less the original retail cost that you should be looking for. Just like this one. Now, let's take the camera down here and let me show you some of the details about this tent and why I chose it. Stay tuned, everybody, because here we go. Hi, and welcome back to my living room floor. My name is Ben, and this is Korea Overlander. So, as we had talked about before, we started thinking about different things that you might want to consider when you're purchasing your tent. Now, I gave you a little bit of background history of this one right here, the North Face Alta. Interestingly enough, I actually looked up the tent, couldn't find any images of it, couldn't even find it on it didn't even show up on Google. Amazing. Anyway, I probably didn't look very hard, but there you go. So one of the things that we want to be considering, let me turn that off. There we go. So one of the things we want to be considering when we are looking for a tent, we talked about a couple things, price being one of them, though that shouldn't be your only consideration. You want to be considering what kind of camping you're doing, whether it's hiking, car camping, whether you just want an awning over an RV for the weekend. Those are the sorts of things you need to consider. And be honest about that. Don't get into the trap of looking at something. I don't know who would do that. Looking at something that looks really, really nice, but totally either outside your means or not what you need. Yeah, I don't know who does that. Anyway, so that's another thing to consider. You also want to consider how many people you're traveling with, whether it's just yourself or maybe a duo, you and your partner. Maybe you've got a small family, 1 or 2 kids, maybe a dog. Throw dog in there too. You got to consider those sorts of things as possible reasons, possible justifications for why you buy certain tents. Now, one of the things that I think would be interesting to consider is this. If you're a family, let's say, if you're you've family and you've got a couple of kids with you, you might think the best option is perhaps to get a family-sized tent, so something that is 4 to 6 people. And while that's true, it certainly would do you fine if you're going car camping. That tent would not be sufficient. It would be highly improper, actually, if you're actually going on an overnight hike, if that's something that you're going to do. So what my recommendation would be is to actually, instead of having one large tent, to actually break it down into two small tents or two smaller tents. The tent behind me, the North Face Alta here, is rated at 2.5 people. Now, I don't know quite where they get the half person from, but we'll just consider that as it is. It's 2.5. It's rated for 2.5 people, so 2 adults can be in that very, very comfortably. If you had 1 child and 1 adult in that tent, would probably be okay. Even if you had 2 small children and 1 adult in that tent, it would probably still be okay. It would be tight, but it would be, I don't think the experience would be unpleasant for one night. Now, the reason why I say that this might be a good idea is because of weight and potentially expense. Let me explain. The weight of a single 4-person or 6-person tent is probably going to be in the 20-pound category. So that's 10 to 12 kilograms-ish for you metric people out there. Now, the reason why I say that is because this tent here, its pack weight is going to be much less than, I would say not much less, but it would be less than half of what a 4 to 6 person tent would be. So if you are hiking and you have, 3, 4, 5 people in your team, having 2 of these would be weight distributed equally or fairly equally between all of the members of the team. Whereas if you have one big tent and you're going on a hike, that would be really inappropriate, because then what's going to happen is one person is going to be carrying a lot of weight, and you might also think, well, now we're going on a smaller trip, maybe we should buy smaller tents. Well, now you've just doubled the cost of your sleeping. So I think downscaling the size of your tents, but having the possibility of opening up more smaller scale tents is actually a much better way of doing it. Certainly what I've done in the past, and I would pass that recommendation on to you. Of course, I'm not saying that that's what you should do. That's just my own recommendation. Now, the other thing that might be of consideration is not just the weight of the tents itself in your pack, but also in your car. Of course, we all know that the more you pack in a car, the more heavy the car becomes, the more weight you have, the more fuel you're going to use. So there is potentially an issue of, environment when we are packing heavier. Which is why I would recommend, even car camping, do try to pack lighter, even though you're not carrying it. Pack as though you are going on an overnight hike rather than an actual car trip. It does save time, money, and energy. So, you might find that 2 of these tents would be perfectly fine for a family of 4. Right? Maybe the kids want to sleep by themselves. Put them in there. You and your wife can have the other tent. Whatever you do, it's up to you. The tents, I mean. Not the... Get your minds out of the gutter, people. All right, so let me show you a little bit about this tent here. I'm just going to kind of eke my way over to the edge so you can see what is going on here. So, one of the things you want to be looking for is airflow. Whew. Very important. As you can see here, you can probably see through the tent actually, there is a very nice airflow going through here. And what you can do is you can figure out where the airflow is at nighttime, set your tent up in a way where the airflow and the breeze comes nicely through. Excellent point. Now, this tent also has an air vent at the top. Why is that important, do you think? Well, you've got 2 big ones here. You've got the cross flow. Why would you need a 3rd one? Well, because heat rises. And while you have a nice big open space, it's always nice to go through and up at the same time. So if you have your tarp on top, which I don't have on right now, simply because I wanted to demonstrate the tent itself, or at least some of the concepts of the tent, that if you have the tarp over your tent, because you're expecting the dew and moisture and stuff to come and settle on that, if that's open, it's going to come right into the tent. So put your tarp on. But if you put your tarp on, it does close off some of the airflow. It's natural. It's going to happen. But if you have a top, a top mesh, even though your breeze might be less, you still have that heat able to escape out of the top. It would go on the outside of the tarp and kind of whoop, fly away. So having that third vent on top can be very, very handy, for sure. Any airflow that you can have inside a tent, no matter how big or small, will decrease condensation. That is super important because you don't want to wake up in a soggy sleeping bag. Personal story, I've done that. Speaking of that $30 tent that I talked about in the first video there, or the first part of the video today, I've been in those types of tents before, and I remember having a down sleeping bag, being all nice and comfy, waking up in the morning, and I was literally being dripped on the inside of the tent because the condensation had built up so much that I had little beads of condensation dripping off the top. Very unpleasant. I took my bag out, took my sleeping bag out, unzipped it, hung it over a tree to air out properly and to dry. It was not a good thing. So that's something to keep in mind. So ventilation is really, really helpful. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention that I did mention before as well is seams. Okay? Now, I'm going to use the tarp as a demonstration just because I can actually move it instead of moving the camera. So give me 1 second here. Now, this is the tarp. This is pretty big, but there's a few things that you're going to want to pay attention. First of all, and you can see hopefully right there, stitching, right? Look at the tarp stitching and see how much is on there. More stitching, generally a better thing. If you only have one strip of stitching, there's a good chance the stitching is going to rip. It's also a good chance that the material itself has not, let me go over here, the material itself has not been overlapped and stitched through, which means that you're going to have moisture going through the tarp, which means if you're in a storm, the inside of your tent's going to get wet, or at least damp. The other thing you want to consider when you are looking at a tent is this right here. Now you can kind of see, hopefully, yeah, you can see that right there. Okay. Now this is a very old tent, as I said before, but that stuff on the tent is actually the seam wax, and you can actually see on here, might be able to see on here, hopefully that will come through. You can actually see the line of wax that has been placed, the seam sealer has been placed over the stitching. So material gets folded, stitching through, double or triple, then the seam sealer on top to basically make that tarp waterproof. Also on the inside as well, there's a waxy feeling on the inside. That's because the tent tarp has been waterproofed. This stuff here is not in the same, it's got a little bit of protection on it, but the tarp is what is really going to protect your keep you dry at night. So those are a couple things about the tarp that you're going to want to consider. Again, you'd have to look at the individual tents to see which one you're looking for, but these are some things that you want to keep in mind. Another thing that might be related to the Korean situation particularly is how long have you been in Korea, and how long do you intend to stay here? that might determine what kind of camping you do, and it might determine what kind of equipment you want. Maybe if you're only intending to stay here for a few years, you might want to think about getting used equipment rather than new equipment. Maybe somebody leaving has got some equipment that they can sell you, in which case you can carry on using their equipment, but be happy with what you have. But on the flip side, if you've been in Korea for a while and you don't see yourself leaving anytime soon, then it might be a worthwhile investment for you to actually go in and get some good equipment, including a good tent back here. Okay. Now, one more thing that I want to show you, or at least tell you about anyway, is if I unzip the tent here. This tent has 2 small pockets on either side. They're not very big. A lot of tents, I've seen a lot of, it's really kind of funny, I've seen a lot of like YouTube videos with tents on it where they've got battery packs inside, and they've got places to put your, literally on the ceiling to put your iPad or your tablet or something in there so you can watch movies or whatever when you're camping. I get the, I get why that might happen, but what are you missing out when you're doing that? That might not be part of the experience that you want to bring, especially if you've got kids. The outdoors becomes your playground, and there's so much to explore out there. So while I'm sure some of you would bring them, I understand if you do, but my initial reaction to that is that sort of technology takes away from the overall experience. The kids are going to be in the tent watching the stuff rather than playing outside. So again, I will leave that up to you, but my personal opinion is leave the tablets at home. Besides, they're expensive, and they get broken, you're out at $800. Another thing that you might want to consider, here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 6 little loops on the inside. Now that can be really, really handy because you can actually create like a little roof for yourself. It's a great way of actually holding supplies up above your head. Maybe a jacket or just some of the things that you don't want to have lying on the floor because you might roll over them. Your keys, phone, etc. That stuff can go up on the top, and it can also be handy. Again, it's a little thing, but it might be something for you to think about. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about tents in general. I do hope that this video has been helpful for you. I'd be curious to know what tent you have, how old have you, or how long have you had it? I wonder if there's anybody out there who has a tent that is aged better and longer than mine. Let's see who might have one out there. Other than that, please subscribe, share the channel, like the video. Don't forget the Instagram and Patreon links. They are going to be in the description below. And as always, here at Korea Overland, live life well. Take care, everybody, and have a great day. Happy camping. Peace.